Sacred spaces have a long history of high expectations. For almost all of Christian history, Christians have traveled across seas and across continents in search of places that were holy enough to seek the presence of God. It's as if we think that the world is a place that is worn thin by sin and a place unworthy of God's presence. And so we only expect Him to dwell in places that have been shaped with sacredness and holiness in mind, or on some forlorn mountaintop. It's as if we think we can purchase the presence of God by going to places that cater to what we perceive to be His preferences. And I have to admit that I'm not immune to that desire or that assumption that God dwells in sacred spaces. A few years ago, my family and I, we had the opportunity to travel to France. And while we were there, we went to this place called Le Mont Saint-Michel, which is a 1,200-year-old church that's situated on an island off the northern coast of France. And when you go into it, the actual church is up on a mountaintop, and you have to ascend these incredible stairs for almost an hour to get to the cathedral. And I remember my whole family, we were just craning our necks as we were taking this stairway, and just being filled already with a sense of awe and expectation, looking at the grand spires and imagining what it would be like once we arrived in the sanctuary. And it happened to be a time in life where I was in between churches, and I was really struggling with, should I still be a pastor? Is God still calling me to ministry? And what would that look like? Is it in a church? Is it not in a church? Should I just give up because I'm so worn out? And I remember thinking to myself, if God won't speak to me there, then I'm not sure He'll speak to me anywhere. And so I developed this mantra as I was walking up the staircase, and just saying, God will speak to me there. God will speak to me there. And my steps, my cadence almost began to match that mantra as it went in my heart and mind. And then finally we got to the sanctuary. We got to open these gigantic wooden doors and to behold these just impossibly high arches. And I found just a modest, plain bench in the back, and I sat on it while my family explored the transepts and all of the art, and I just was filled with this incredible sense of awe, just staring up and beholding the grandiosity of it all. And then finally I found the courage to let go of the words that I had been holding on to so tightly. God, speak, for your servant is listening. But there was no thunderclap from the vaulted ceilings. There was no dove bursting forth through the stained glass. There was no miraculous thing that happened. I was just left with that sense of awe and overly aware of how stone cold the inside of that place was. I have to admit to you that as we walked back down the hillside, I was really filled with a sense of sorrow. And that thought just nagged in my mind, if God won't speak to me in a place like that, in a place where people have uttered desperate prayers for 1,200 years, then where on earth will God speak to me? And I need an answer. I need to know, what direction does He want me to go with my life? I'm aimless. I'm rudderless. Please, God, speak to me. Now that night, I was putting my boys to bed like I always do, and I was reading Dr. Seuss, and as I was doing that, I just looked at both of them. You know, they were 6 and 3 at the time, and I thought about how hard this time of Dad not having a job and being rudderless and aimless and searching for God. I thought about how hard it was on them. And as these nonsensical rhymes are coming out of my mouth, I just felt the presence of God, and I felt that small, still voice reverberating in my soul that said, I'm not done with you, Matt. That was it. There was nothing else. There was no 4-step plan. There was nothing that really answered my questions. Church, no church, pastor, not pastor, ministry, not ministry. None of that. And yet, the incredible sacredness of that voice was all I needed, of that sense of God's presence was all I needed. And so I invite you to, if you need an answer from God, if you need the presence of God, if you are in a place where you desperately need to hear from Him and you are looking for His direction for you, or you're looking for His word over your life, I invite you not to come to holy places. I invite you not to seek out spots that have catered to our own sense of what is sacred and grand and good and heavenly. Instead, I ask that you invite God into the washing of your dishes, that you invite God into the earthly places around you, that you invite God into the planting of your vegetables, into the watering of your flowers, into the putting your kids to bed, into those moments that are so earthly. Because Scripture tells us that the Word, the presence, the voice, the mind of God became flesh and dwelled among us, among prostitutes and tax collectors, grubby peasant kids, amongst everything in the world that is plain and simple and unholy. That's where He walked. That's where He gave His presence most fully. And so I think if we invite Him into our dim, broken, dirty, plain, earthly moments, I think that we find that He turns the tables, that He says, forget all this. Forget all this grasping after me with beautiful edifices. And let me make your earthly, ordinary, broken places holy with my presence.